Welcome into hardcore Penn State football. Penn State falls to Oregon in an instant classic Big Ten championship. They land at the number 6 seed in the first ever 12-team college football playoff. The transfer portal is open. Early signing day is, I guess, still technically open in the world of which it works nowadays. And Penn State will face SMU at noon on TNT in just over a week, in a couple of days. A lot to get into. Make sure you have liked the video and you've subscribed on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, make sure you're subscribed there as well. Let's get right into the show. Welcome into hardcore Penn State football. I'm Corey Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How you doing today, Shawn?
Pretty good, Corey. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Eras Tour. Taylor Swift, I am now in my playoff era. How about you?
Well, we were talking about I had no idea where you were going with that for a second. We were talking before the show started. It is nice that we are still talking about Penn State football and not just Penn State football preparing for a New Year's Six bowl game. As exciting as the Rose Bowl is, as exciting as the Peach Bowl is, as exciting as the Fiesta Bowl is, Penn State still has things to play for on December 11th, which has not happened very often.
Yeah. First playoff appearance. I know it's expanded playoff. The funny thing is, if we were under the same playoff rules, assuming no chicanery went on, we would have still been in the playoff this year, which is kind of funny to think about under the old format. And we're in the playoff this year, and I know we'll be getting into our playoff path, but I'm feeling pretty good about where we're at right now.
I would say so. I mentioned that it was going to be possible, and who knows how they would have done the rankings if it was only 4 teams, but Penn State would have been in a pretty good position. And, even if they change the way they do the seeding moving forward, Penn State probably would have even got a better spot. They would have been the 4th seed. They probably would have got a bye potentially moving forward. So in a really good spot. Shout out to PS Jengle on YouTube. He says, "Hey guys, hello from gate B19 at Chicago Airport." So shout out to PS Jengle watching live from 7 p.m. in the airport on a Wednesday. Not the most fun, but appreciate you guys being here watching us. Also, shout out to longtime listener Mighty Jew. Of course, with a little "we are" in there. Appreciate that as well. Shawn, we're going to talk about Oregon first. We're going to talk about the playoff second. And then we are going to talk about SMU at the very end. We got a bunch of fan questions to get to. Some random housekeeping items to get to real quick. Former Penn State linebacker Paul Posluszny officially inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Shawn, he's one of your favorite linebackers, 2-time Benerick Award winner, Buckus Award winner, 8 years-ish in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills. What are your thoughts on Paz being inducted officially in the College Football Hall of Fame?
Well deserved, for sure. He is one of the all-time greats here. I know when we did our playoff ranking, feels like many moons ago now, or not playoff ranking, listen to me, linebacker ranking, all time.
The draft.
Yes. Paul Paz, I believe, was 2nd or 3rd. He was definitely in the top 4. And I think it was before he knew that he'd be inducted. So, I mean, it was pretty evident that this was going to be a direction this was going to be a path for him. And like I said, just really well deserved. Awesome football player, really everything you want in a linebacker. And I do, to this day, I think that knee injury that he had in the Orange Bowl, I think if that doesn't happen, he would have been an even better pro than he was. And he was still a really good pro player. He just had trouble staying healthy.
Absolutely. Shout out to him. Just going to go to the next housekeeping item here, not discredit Paul Posluszny, but we have a lot to talk about in what Josh Pate would consider a jam-packed show tonight. Andy Kotelnicki. We have a couple questions on it, so we don't need to go a full dive into this, Shawn. We got a couple fan questions about it, so let's maybe curb the analysis. Let's just get not to bury the lead. Was interviewed and was linked to the West Virginia head coaching job. That did not end up happening. Part of the reason we think maybe because they wanted him to step in right away and he wanted to continue this playoff run. Andy Kotelnicki tweeted out, "Hey, I'm here, I'm staying," and he's looking forward to what he can do in 2025. So it sounds like Penn State is going to keep their offensive coordinator for another year. We're going to talk about Oregon in just a second, but you could argue one of Andy Kotelnicki's best coached games and play calling games in the Big Ten championship. Looks like they're going to have their offensive coordinator for another year. Just breaking news, like before we came on the show, West Virginia is going to be hiring former West Virginia coach Rich Rodriguez, who was at Jacksonville State, back to West Virginia. So that job is officially closed. And also, if you're just curious, Bill Belichick has signed a deal with North Carolina, 3 years, $30 million. So 2 head coach vacancies already done, and Andy Kotelnicki appears to be staying with the Nittany Lions for at least another year.
Yeah, big day for the old guys, right? Rich Rod and Bill Belichick. I mean, the Rich Rod one is, I mean, both of them are really, really surprising. I mean, I don't know if Rich Rod has had a successful stop since he's been at West Virginia, so a little funny that they hired him, but hey, good luck. And yeah, obviously with the Kotelnicki news, I think if you're somebody who wants Drew Allar to return, that's a big domino that needed to fall. Because
that's another fan question tonight, actually.
Yeah. So, and look, do I know if Drew's coming back? I don't. I think he should. Depending on how the playoff run goes, if he balls out, maybe he moves right up mock draft boards. If that happens, then I understand going. But this has to help, and not only for a guy like him, with a guy like Nick Singleton, with a guy like Kaytron Allen, Harrison Wallace. If he starts thinking about going pro, I think this only helps having Andy come back, because we have quite a bit coming back next year. I got to replace a lot on the interior of the offensive line, but other than that, and Tyler Warren, obviously. But other than that, we could have a whole lot come back.
Speaking of that, because I'm going to keep moving forward in the housekeeping items, Penn State got their 2025 football schedule randomly. I think I'm in agreement again with Josh Pate that this should be a spectacle sometime in the spring. They should make this more exciting than a random Wednesday in December. But Penn State's football schedule has been released. I'm going to run through it very quickly. Nevada, FIU, Villanova.
Brutal.
Bye. Oregon, and if you're keeping track, like Shawn texted me earlier, not leaving State College until October, to go then at UCLA, then home versus Northwestern, then at Iowa. Cue all the scared Penn State fans going to at Iowa. Bye week at Ohio State, home against Indiana, at Michigan State, home against Nebraska, at Rutgers. Shawn, quick thoughts here. Bye week before facing Oregon. Can't argue that. Probably going to be Fox, big noon kick, and a stripe out. Going to the Rose Bowl the week after that, so that'll be fun. At Iowa, that's always going to be a challenge. A bye week before going to Ohio State. So you have a bye week before Oregon and a bye week before Ohio State, and then they host Indiana. They're going to play the 3 other best teams in the Big Ten this year, next year, for whatever that's worth. And the final thing I have to say, and then we obviously will have plenty of time to break down the schedule. I'll let you get your sense in a second. Einstein von Braun with one of the best comments. He said, "Hey, when Nebraska comes to town, maybe we can get Matt Rule to do some NIL fundraising for us, since he'd be so good at that." Fantastic comment. You know how we like to bag on that quite a bit, on how Matt Rule should not be Penn State's next head coach. Thought that was very funny. Shawn, what are your thoughts about this schedule?
Yeah, I mean, the buys before Ohio State and Oregon, I think that'll help. So, the thing is, outside of Ohio State and Oregon, the rest of these teams, and maybe you could put Iowa in there, the rest of these teams are really question marks. Because this year, I know Indiana's really, really good. I actually think they're a little better than the national media gives them credit for. But they built a
They'll have a
lot of
chance to
this.
prove it.
Yeah, they built a lot of this team through the portal. And keep in mind, Florida State had success in the portal last year, and then this year they were awful, and they were kind of going with the same model. So it's very, very, very risky using that model. So I don't really know what to expect from them. But in the event, let's say they take a couple steps back next year, maybe they're 6-6, 7-5. A team like Michigan State could rise up. A team like Nebraska could rise up. UCLA, I think UCLA was playing pretty decently as the year went on. So, and we have to go out there for that game, and we didn't play our A game when we were in LA this past year. So I think there are going to be other teams that may be a little bit better. But like I said, these days, outside of Ohio State and Oregon, there's no real sure things when you look at next season.
No, not at all. I mean, again, Washington was in the national championship, and they ended up being middle of the road team in the Big Ten this year. Just quickly wanted to give some love. Mighty Jew says, after how we played versus Oregon, I'm confident we can play tough with anybody. We're going to get to the playoff talk in just a second. Lambda says, hope we get Zane Durant back to what you were talking about a little bit earlier. I would hope so, but I am not too confident in that. Harrison Wallace, David Bortner says will not be getting drafted. We'll see where that kind of lands. And then his question.
I agree, but that hasn't stopped guys before.
That's right. And he has good size. His question, though, what's the deal with student tickets to the playoff? Yeah, I'm not going to harp too much on this. From what we understand, the college football playoff was going to allocate all of the student tickets that Penn State had, so all 20,000. Then Penn State then reached out to the students and said, hey, you need to sign up, get these, reserve your spot. We will do the full 20. Then Penn State returned tickets, student tickets, back to the college football playoff, and now those are open for public sale. Where this gets a little sketchy is there are students saying that they did not get tickets that they requested. So there's a little bit of some skepticism there. And to what Judy Seeley just said on YouTube, there are a lot of tickets available for this home game. I mean, to the point where I'm getting nervous that it may not be full, especially when you look at the Notre Dame-Indiana game, which I know it's an in-state rivalry. And Indiana's probably one of the biggest games in their entire, if not their entire program's history. Those are going for like $1,100, $1,400. Lots of empty seats right now for Penn State, SMU. And kind of why it's probably a noon game. It's not as exciting as probably the other matchups that weekend. But Shawn, not great that if it's true that students were unable to get seats and there were some left over that was sent back to college football playoff.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems kind of fluid right now because Penn State is saying one thing, some of the students are saying another. I know Rich Scarcella and Audrey Snyder both tweeted if this has happened, you reach out to them, and I'm hoping that they could get to the bottom of it just to find out what exactly is happening. And if it's true, then yeah, they need to arrange something for these kids. We talked about in the summer how screwed up it is with student tickets now that they have to enter some lottery in order to get their tickets, as opposed to what happened when we were kids. You'd log in at 7 a.m. Was that a perfect system? No, but at least it made sense. And if you went in at 7 a.m., odds are you're going to get your tickets. I know me and all my friends that were really into Penn State, we never got denied tickets because we all went and did that. But yeah, if you slept until 7:30, you probably weren't. But there was some. It made sense in the end, right? It's kind of the best way to do it than some lottery. So if it turns out that a few months later these playoff tickets are available and they followed all the rules and still didn't get them, that's a bad look for the university. But we got to wait and see.
Absolutely would be. I think last random housekeeping item that I just wanted to mention for the fun of it. Haruna the Ninth, SMU's live pony mascot, will not be attending the playoff game in person in State College, according to Audrey Snyder. Just want to let you know that Peruna did visit the ACC championship last week, and in a controversial year back in 1934, one of Peruna's, I guess that would be like great grandson, daughter, mother, whatever, grandmother, father, went all the way to New York City in 1934 to play against Fordham. So can't imagine traveling up to State College in 2024 is as challenging as it was in 1934 to go from Dallas all the way to New York City. So for whatever reason, though, the pony will not. Maybe it's just Penn State being very, how they are about the grass. And they're like, no ponies are allowed on the grass. I'm not sure. Last thing I'll say about the mascot for SMU, there is I think untrue but still interesting story that it may be the only mascot ever to kill another mascot. There's a rumor that it kicked the Fordham mascot that day and actually killed it. Now, there are some questioning stories on if that actually true, but the Ram mascot was allegedly kicked and killed by Peruna back in 1934. So take that for what you will. Maybe Penn State's like, hey, we don't want a homicidal pony on the field. But anyway, I wanted to provide that little random college football. That's why we love this sport, and that's why we're such big fans of it.
Yeah, does sound a bit made up, but who knows?
Who knows? Back then, dude, 1930s, everybody had like a cool middle nickname if they were a sports player. Like, people were just doing whatever the hell they wanted. It's definitely possible. All right, Shawn, enough flapping of our lips. Penn State lost to Oregon. And it doesn't really feel like a post-loss podcast tonight, Shawn. They lost 45-37. 8 points for those that can't do quick math. They were down 28-10 at one point. For once ever, I believe they were outscored in the third quarter 7-0. I don't think that's happened all year. They've been very good in the third quarter. Shawn, weird game in the sense that the Penn State defense gave up 3 straight touchdowns to start the game. Even weirder that Penn State averaged 8.7 yards per carry and lost. I need to go back and do the math, but I don't think that's ever happened before. I don't think Penn State's ever ran for 8.7 yards per carry and not won the football game. A game where Drew Allar was 20 of 39 with 3 touchdowns, and Tyler Warren didn't have any of those, and yet Penn State didn't win. In a game where Oregon only scored 14 points in the second half and was able to win this football game. So a lot of weird things going on. We had the typical official issues. We had the questionable coaching decisions. It was a very jam-packed game. Penn State comes up a little bit short, but I come out of this game like, wait a second. In a way, this Penn State Nittany Lion team passed some sort of litmus test. They were able to play with the number 1 team in the country. And although they weren't able to get the job done when it was all said and, when the final whistle blew, this team was able to compete and play with the number 1 team in the country and had opportunities to win this football game if they were able to cut down on the penalties, cut down on the turnovers, and take care of the football just a little bit more, maybe cause a turnover of their own. They were relatively close to winning this football game. And I think just like the playoff committee, viewed this as a good performance by Penn State. And I feel a lot better about going into the playoff, where I think Penn State can actually do some serious damage. And there's not really anybody I'm scared of based off of what we saw on Saturday. So I'm coming out of this fairly optimistic. Penn State passed the test for me as far as what they may or may not be able to do in the college football playoff.
Yeah. I didn't think they had it in them to score 37 points on a good defense. I just didn't think they did. And then going into this game, I did pick Penn State to lose, but did not go at all like I thought it would. I thought it would be more of a defensive battle. I did not think it would turn into any kind of shootout or anything like that, and that's really what it was. And I'm happy that Penn State's offense, answered the bell. But there are reasons we lost, right? And I know a lot of people have been talking about how good Drew played. I didn't think Drew played that great. I think he had some good moments, but he missed a lot of open receivers. He had 2 bad interceptions. I think his first interception might have been the worst one he ever threw, just behind Dinkins, and just not a good throw. And then his second one too, I know we'll talk about the play call itself, but even if it was a deep shot, and I think it wasn't there. So I don't know why he threw it. So I didn't think this was that great of a game from Drew. He did have one of the best passes I've ever seen from a Penn State quarterback, to cut it to 8 late. So I'm not saying there weren't any good moments and there wasn't anything to feel good about from him, but we need him to play better. But the biggest reason why we lost was the defense gave up 45 points, and that ain't gonna cut it. That's not this team really isn't built to go and get 46 points. So I don't think you really want to get into a game like that, especially with a team like Oregon. It's just a lot. It's just a lot to put on your offense. I guess I won't put Drew, the touchdown that came off Drew's interception, too much on the defense, because it was essentially a pick six that got all the way back to the 1-yard line, but everything else was on them.
Right.
And of course the dumb penalties didn't help either.
Yeah, so let's start unpacking some of that. I agree with what you said about Drew Allar. I think he had some good moments. Honestly, that second and 1 play to Trey Wallace there, just not a good throw. I don't even care about the decision. But if he throws that ball back shoulder where it's either caught or out of bounds, it's not a problem. He just threw it in one that it couldn't be thrown. And Oregon also has good playmakers. That was not an easy interception to come down with. It was a hell of a pick on top of that. But I agree with you. Like, there were some easy throws that he missed. He also had 2 drops by Tyler Warren, and he had a drop technically on the books by Omari Evans that wasn't a drop. So you're looking at 23 of 39 there. But you're right. Some big misses. That interception was very rough, but also some incredible throws, especially that one that you mentioned on 4th and 10. The running game, Shawn. Kaytron Allen, 14 carries for 124. Nick Singleton, 10 carries for 105. Drew Allar, 5 more carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Drew Allar ends up with 4 total touchdowns in this game and 280 yards of combined offense. Like, he was in a way the best he's looked from a yardage perspective, maybe not from a decision-making perspective, but he was able to move around in the pocket, and he was able to pick up yards and first downs and touchdowns with his legs, and he was also able to thread the needle when he needed to. My biggest thing coming out of this offense is the offensive line. I can't go any further in this conversation and not talk about the offensive line. We were kind of going into this game thinking the Oregon defensive line was going to give problems to Penn State and what they were doing up front, especially without right tackle Anthony Dunca. Well, I don't care what Daddy Uiagalelei has to say. His boy and his boy's friends got their ass whooped on Saturday night. If you haven't, go check out For the Bloggy. You'll see it for yourself. But Nolan Rucci, coming of age moment for him. Boy to man moment, blocking his ass off against, again, Uiagalelei and some of those other folks over there, Birch, etc. I thought Nick Dawkins played very well. I thought Drew Shelton played very well. And in general, the offensive line whooped up on the Oregon defensive line. And that was really and should have been the story if Penn State would have won this football game. I mean, yes, Kaytron Allen did some good things. Yes, Nick Singleton did some good things. But, man, you and I could have ran through some of those holes. I mean, there were some massive holes and massive lanes for these tailbacks to get to the second level before they were even touched. So very impressed with that. And they did very well in the pass pro as well. Only 1 sack for Oregon. And that was by Harmon, number 55. Now, that was also because Drew Allar continues to move around the pocket very well, but still, only 1 sack for this Oregon defense? Like, that is a huge win, especially given the fact that Penn State was losing for most of the game and having to drop back a little bit more. I mean, I just told you that Drew Allar threw the ball 39 times, but how many of his runs were scrambles? So he really probably dropped back closer to what, 45 times? And they only got 1 sack? That's a huge, huge momentum builder for Penn State. And that's probably why I feel the best about the playoff is this offensive line took a huge step forward. If they're able to do that against Oregon, the only other defensive line I'm terrified of is Ohio State's. And they're not going to see them or Oregon unless they get very, 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 very deep into the playoff. So Shawn, the offensive line really, really impressed me on Saturday.
Yeah, me too. Because I didn't really know if this was a championship level offensive line. As a matter of fact, I didn't think this was a championship level offensive line until the Big Ten championship. And I thought could be a rough day for Nolan Rucci, and it was not. Drew was pretty clean the whole game. And if I'm not mistaken, Corey, I think the 1 sack was on Bo Prabula.
Might be right.
Yeah, so Drew never even got sacked, as far I think. So that's very, very impressive, and that's not even to mention the run game. It was discouraging after the Maryland game how bad we ran the ball, and really all month we didn't run the ball that great except for the Washington game, and for them to go and have. I thought Kane Allen had the performance of his career on Saturday. I thought he was awesome. He looked faster. He was making cuts. He looked great. And that's not even to mention Nick Singleton. One of the things that I really didn't like from Andy Kotelnicki was I thought it took too long to get to the run game. I didn't in the first half. I thought we could have ran the ball a lot more than we did. And I guess, at halftime, make their adjustments. And I think the simple adjustment was, hey, they can't stop us on the ground. Let's just keep running the ball. And pretty simple enough, because there was a time, midway through the game that Drew was just missing a lot of throws. And it didn't make sense to me why we just kept throwing the ball. And I even yelled in the middle of my grandma's living room, why are we not run the ball? I let out a run the ball.
Run the damn ball.
Yeah, except I sounded much more angry. Because it just didn't make any sense to me. Like, they clearly couldn't stop us. And Drew was struggling. So when your quarterback is struggling, you have to make things easier for him and lean on what's working. And I thought at times Kotelnicki did that. But they should have had a lot more carries. I think Singleton only had 10 carries in the game, and he had over 100 yards rushing. So I don't understand how that happens.
Yeah, he did have another 4 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown there as well. So 14 total touches for Nick Singleton. Kane Allen had 17 touches. So decent amount of touches for them. I mean, at the end of the day, that's still 17. That's still 31 touches for your running back. So it's more. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you, but it is a bunch in that sense. But I agree with you in that. Receivers, Shawn. Tyler Warren had a quiet day with 7 catches for 84 yards, 1 monster grab there by the sideline. Did have 1 or 2 drops that were kind of made you like shake your head. Not his best game, which is kind of crazy to say. Over 1,000 yards receiving now. The Mackey Award comes out on Thursday, so we'll know tomorrow whether he wins that. I'm pretty sure Penn State fans will burn this entire country to the ground if he doesn't win that award. Was announced tonight that he did not win the Paul Hornung Most Versatile Player Award. That went to Travis Hunter at Colorado, but did not get a touchdown from Tyler Warren, whether I was receiving or rushing. But they were able to supplement that with Nick Singleton, 4 carries, 43 yards, like I mentioned. Trey Wallace, 4 catches, 59 yards, and that tough snag in the end zone. And then Omari Evans, with his technically only one catch of 22 yards for a touchdown, but he had that one other one that was, for whatever reason, we'll talk to about officiating. We have a fan question about that, so we'll save that for a fan question. But they were able to spread the ball out, Shawn, and it wasn't to a bunch of different receivers. As I said, they only had it to 2 receivers, but they got the ball to the running backs, they got the ball to the tight ends, and it felt like the ball was getting spread out, even if it wasn't necessarily going to the receivers.
Yeah. I thought a big play in the game was out of halftime. We put the tackle out at receiver, brought Tyler Warren into play. He was lined up as a tackle, and Oregon lost Tyler Warren, and he was open. And again, Drew just missed him. And I thought that was a big play because then Ryan Barker got a rare miss from him on a field goal, and we got nothing on a pretty long drive to open up the second half. So I thought that was a big moment in the game. Overall, though, the receivers did their job. They did what we wanted them to do. We said they're going to have to make some plays, and they did. Omari Evans has a thing for making his catches count and ending up in the end zone. And yeah, Harrison Wallace was very, very good the whole game and was there. He was able to move the chains. Like you mentioned, he had the touchdown late on that.
That one play, he was like wide open on, I think it was third down, like third or maybe it was second and long after a penalty. But he was like wide open, like he caught it and bobbled it for a second. And then like, I don't know if he was surprised how wide open he was, but then he just like nobody was there. And he just ran for an extra 15 yards.
Yeah. Yeah, he was very, very good. We didn't really get too much from anybody else receiving. The Khalil Dinkins catch, I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't know how he didn't pick up a first down on that because the guy made such a weak attempt at a tackle and then he just like stepped out of bounds. I was like, what are you doing? They got at least 10 more yards.
Hey, we did have a receiving stat. Liam Clifford did have a tackle. So don't take that away from him.
Did he save the pick six?
I think so.
Okay. I
for what that's worth.
I don't remember him playing, so
yeah. I'm not even sure if it was a pick six tackle, but he did register a tackle.
Well, that's good.
Before we get to the Oregon and Penn State's defense side of things, because
did Fleming play?
He was out there.
Okay, yeah.
I want to talk to you about two of the decisions. Number one, the decision to go for 2 down 14. I liked the decision in the sense of analytics wise, that's what you're supposed to do. I think the Washington Commanders won that the other night not the other night, that was like a month and a half ago now, doing something similar. It is in the sense that if you have a 50% chance of getting a 2-point conversion, if you get it, then a field goal PAT wins you the football game. If you don't get it, you still have another 50% chance to tie it. So you work those odds. However, and Shawn, we've had this conversation before, so I don't want to go crazy deep into it. I don't think Penn State, if you go back under James Franklin through all the 2-point conversions, I don't think Penn State's very close to 50% on 2-point conversions. I would argue they're probably closer to 25, 30% on 2-point conversions. So, yes, if you assume it's a coin flip, it might be right to make that decision. But I think Penn State specifically is probably closer to 30%, which drastically changes whether or not you should do that or not. And do you really, even if you were at 50%, going up against Oregon's defense, which I know you did very well in, but Oregon's defense plus the fact that you're not a great red zone team in general, do you still think it's close to 50%? Probably not. So I don't like it in the sense of you're probably not 50%. In general, I would say it's a right decision. For Penn State specifically, given that they're not a very good red zone touchdown offense, and the fact that they're going up against an Oregon defense, I would have rather, and they had the momentum that I think you didn't really want to lose in that situation. I think they should have kicked the PAT. But in a black and white world where we're only looking at analytics, it was the right decision Terrible play call, by the way. Probably the worst play call Andy Kotelnicki had of the day. Not even exactly sure what was supposed to happen, but it was just one of those like, oh, we got way too cute there kind of moments.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, one of the things about James Franklin that gets talked about is, oh, Franklin coaches not to lose. And then he misses something that he's aggressive on, is, why is Franklin doing that? And people just get to be mad either way. Like you said, the analytics tell you that's the right decision, because if you don't get it, odds are they're not going to be able to stop you twice going for two. And then you'll be able to tie the game. Like you said, I think a lot of it comes down to feel. And I didn't necessarily hate it. I gotta feel like if it was, being that it didn't work out, it doesn't look so good. And like you said, being that Penn State historically has not been good at going for two, you do have to take that into account. And then the play call. I think the play call is the thing that I had the biggest issue with, because you're gonna run the Philly special. But do you know what made the Philly special work? The tight end never threw the ball before in a game. I think it was Trey Burton. He never threw the ball before in a game, in an NFL game. So that's what made it work. Where we run it with Tyler Ward, when he comes in motion, gets the ball in the backfield, everybody knows he could put it up. So why are you doing that there? I think it would have made more sense to line us up in the Warren package where he's the quarterback and have him throw. I think that would have made more sense than having to run this elaborate Philly special and then Drew's the primary receiver. But that's just me. So overall, I gotta probably say I come out on the side of I didn't like it when you bring into account the play call.
Right. The other one, the pick at the end of the game there, I will say this. It's 2nd and 1. It's a great opportunity to take a shot to get a big chunk play, come back on second. You're running the ball as well as you are. You're not worried about picking up 1 yard on 2 downs if you get an incompletion on 2nd and 1. I have no issue with taking a shot there. That ball just seems to be thrown better. But I wanted to give you a chance to say like yes or no to that.
Yeah, I didn't really like that one. Just because, all right, so if you take a shot there, let's say you score. Or you're giving Oregon the ball with almost 2 minutes. Are you sure your defense is going to stop them? I think if you score there, well, let me put it this way. Let's say they mess up, Wallace catches the ball. I think I'd be yelling at my TV, go down, go down. We need to go down at the 1 yard line. Because I wouldn't want Oregon to have that much time to go down and kick a field goal. So personally, I think running the ball makes the most sense. I think there is a world that exists. We could have caught them with their pants down. And I think that's what they were trying to go for. And credit to Oregon, they weren't fooled by it. But I probably but I really didn't like the play call. But I'm more upset with Drew for throwing it, because it just wasn't there. And it was weird to see him try to force something downfield.
All right, let's talk about the Oregon offense / Penn State defense. Probably the more disappointing side of the story. Give credit where credit's due. Dillon Gabriel, 22 of 32, 283, 4 touchdowns, ran for 17 yards. Penn State did a good job of not letting Gabriel hurt him with their legs. They did still average 4.5 yards per carry. Jordan James, 4.4 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. Noah Whittington, 82 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. But Shawn, probably the biggest difference maker in this game was transfer wide receiver Tez Johnson. 11 carries, 181 yards, and a touchdown. Really, I mean, just took over the game. No other Oregon receiver or tight end had more than 3 catches or running back for that matter, had more than 3 catches. Kenyon Sadiq, who, by the way, had a hell of a catch and hurdle for a touchdown, had 2 catches and 2 touchdowns. So he did as much as he could with his opportunities, but it was Tez Johnson over and over and over again that was sort of the difference in the middle of the field. A lot of speed, but Penn State just wasn't. And that was my concern going into this was exactly something like that happening. The slot receiver hurting them. Can Dom DeLuca, can Tony Rojas, can the safeties. Jalen Reed didn't have a great day in covering Tez Johnson either. Can they slow him down? And they weren't able to. And Tez Johnson's a hell of a receiver. Probably not going to see anybody like that again and again. So maybe Ohio State, like he's that much of a difference maker. But Penn State did not have an answer for him. And at the end of the day, he was sort of the difference for the Oregon offense.
Yeah, I thought he was the best player in the field, and that's saying something with how good Dylan Gabriel played. But, we kind of made it relatively easy on them because they were just flying open. It was kind of like the Bowling Green game, except we were playing better players. Bowling Green first half. During that Bowling Green game, you kind of had in the back of your head, well, we'll get it together, just because we have better players than them. But when you have players like a Tez Johnson, like a Dylan Gabriel, well, they're really, really freaking good. And there's not going to be any kind of really stopping them. I mean, credit to the defense. They only gave up 14 points in the second half, but they just got decimated the whole first half. And it got away from them. So, Tez Johnson was really the story. I do think it underscores it bigger, and I actually tweeted this after the game. It really underscores something between Penn State and Oregon. Penn State has been active in the transfer portal trying to get receivers. Oregon has also been, and Tez Johnson was a big hit, and our guys have really missed. Fleming had a couple moments at USC, but outside of that, the past 2 years, our receivers just haven't worked out that we brought in, and ultimately a transfer guy made the difference.
We have a fan question about that from Einstein Von Braun in a second. This Penn State defense, Kobe King, 10 total tackles in this one TFL. I thought he played very well, given the fact that no one else really did have a good day. Abdul Carter did end up with 6 tackles. Shawn, help me out here. Yes, he was held. And I saw that a lot of praise is going to the offensive tackle for Oregon on that. Take that for what you will. At what point, how do we differentiate you're being held every play and it also shouldn't matter? We need you to make an impact regardless.
Yeah, it's both. And I do think Abdul Carter played better as the game went on. You started seeing number 11 flashing more. I thought he was still pretty good against the run. But yeah, he didn't really affect Gabriel in the way that we wanted him to. I think Denai Sutton actually did a better job getting after him than Abdul Carter. And Denai Sutton also, we've seen him play better games. So it's both. But yeah, he was held pretty much the whole game. But we've seen him get held pretty much the whole game in pretty much every Big Ten game this year. So it shouldn't be anything new for him. But it also doesn't help that Oregon also has a really good offensive line. You do have to give those guys a lot of credit for slowing him down. I know fans will yell about the holds, and they were definitely there. And Oregon was really able to do whatever they wanted on the offensive line as far as holding our guys. But again, this is something we've dealt with the whole year, and we've still been able to get after quarterbacks. So we can't just kind of go and make ourselves feel better by just saying, well, he was held the whole time. He's got to play better.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, I mentioned Jalen Reed. He really struggled in this football game.
Yeah.
Did not have a good day. I see that somebody on YouTube said from Benny's Nation that it's a game where you really miss KJ Winston back there. I think that's a good point. You do miss KJ Winston. I saw somebody on Twitter mention if you had Curtis Jacobs and Kalen King in this game, how much does that make a difference? You can get a lot of what ifs. You can argue just having Keon Wiley would be healthy alongside KJ Winston. You feel a lot better about it. So a lot of those kind of what if moments. But at the end of the day, there was a fumble on the ground. The ball happened to bounce right back to Dylan Gabriel instead of Penn State recovering it. And that could have changed the entire game. So Penn State unable to get a turnover. And that's something I've harped on quite a bit as well, is in these games where you are even on the playing field, being able to force turnovers at a higher percentage makes a difference. And now some people are going to tell you that turnovers are random. And to a certain extent, I think they are. But we saw with Manny Diaz is you can increase the rate at which you get turnovers. And if you're Tom Allen and you're giving up 3 straight touchdowns anyway, why not take some more risks? Because whatever you're doing isn't working anyway. So I was disappointed in Tom Allen. I came in saying this could be a big moment for Tom Allen. And what do? They give up 3 touchdowns right away. I was ready for them to give up the first one, but then to give up 2 more, you're kind of just, and again, they were guided by a couple face masks that the coach can't control. But at the end of the day, it seemed again that Tom Allen was caught with his pants down, and the scripted plays were working against Penn State.
Yeah, it was not Tom Allen's finest hour. But he
fan question on that too.
Yeah, we just straight up was not. At some point, looking back at it, they have so much speed, and there's only so much the coach could do. Right. But I thought they could have been more aggressive, maybe bring pressure, making Gabriel uncomfortable, and they just didn't. And I think that's one of the things that I liked so much about Diaz as compared to Tom Allen. It's just the overall philosophy. And I do think a lot of times Allen's defense is kind of just sit back. And I don't really like that. I think you have to be the one dictating the terms of the game. And you just didn't see that you just didn't see that against Oregon. It felt like everything was so reactive and not really taking it to them at all, and just kind of sitting back and letting everything happen. So wasn't thrilled by Tom Allen. I haven't really been thrilled by Tom Allen most of the year. I think he's a good coach, but he's way closer to Brent Pry than he is to Manny Diaz.
That's a good way to put it. Lumber Jake, good old Jake Coulter John, says thoughts on Andy Kotelnicki. Not exactly sure withdrawing is the right word there. We know that he was a front runner there for a little bit. We have a fan question on that, 2 fan questions on that, so we'll get to more of that in a second. But we did talk about how Andy Kotelnicki will be back in 2025, which is pretty exciting there. Shawn, before I wrap up on this Penn State Oregon game, which I think has some fan questions on it anyway, but at the end of the day, just for people that think maybe we're out of our mind here and Penn State didn't play that well, if you look at the numbers, Penn State was in this football game. They did better on 3rd down conversions. They had more total yards. They had more rushing yards. They had more rushing yards per carry. But they had more first downs. But where did they get hurt the most? They lost the turnover battle 2-0. They lost the penalty battle 65 yards to 24 yards. And they did lose the time of possession as well. So all in all, Penn State had, from a statistical perspective, a very good chance of winning this football game. But the turnovers, the penalties, ended up being kind of the deciding factor in this one. Final thoughts before we kind of shift over to the playoff conversation.
Yeah, it does remind me of, I don't watch his show, thankfully, but it did come up on my Twitter. Colin Cowherd said that Oregon hammered Penn State. Like, maybe he was hammered watching the game, but that is not the way this game went. Penn State, they played, especially on offense, they played well enough to win the game, and it just didn't happen. And like you said, the reason Franklin harps on turnovers so much is when you lose the turnover battle, your chance of winning a game plummets, especially when you're playing against especially when you're playing against a team that's better than you. Well, better than you or even with you. And Oregon went 13-0 this year. Penn State did go 11-1. Did go 11-1, now 11-2. But they're on a similar level. And Oregon has one of the most explosive offenses in the country. So when you make a mistake, you're going to pay for it. And if you're not able to make them commit turnovers, well, it's very hard to counter. It's very hard to counteract that. And like we said, one of the bigger plays in the game was the near pick six, because that's 7 points that you're basically gifting them, because at the 1 yard line they're going to score in all likelihood. So I think I think really it's one of those ink blot tests where you could get a lot. It depends on, you could kind of get what you're looking for in this, because there's a positive way to look at it, which I think which I'm kind of in the camp of, where you could say, look, we played right with them and we didn't come anywhere close to playing our A game, and we still had a chance to win this thing at the end. And maybe the offense is peaking at the right time. So that's the positive way to look at it. The negative way to look at it is we lost another game against a really good team.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. Found a different way to lose. All right. I know people are probably waiting for this. Let's jump over and talk about the college football playoff. Here it is. For people that are watching live on YouTube, on podcasts, we have the bracket up. My big head is in the way of some of Georgia, but here it is. Number 1, Oregon gets a bye. Number 2, Georgia gets a bye. Or I should say seeds. These are all seeds. Number 1 ranked Oregon gets a bye. Number 2 ranked Georgia gets a 2nd seed and a bye. Number 9th ranked Boise State gets a 3rd seed and a bye. Number 12th ranked Arizona State, who blew out their opponent in the Big 12 championship, gets the 4th seed despite being ranked 12th. Texas, who lost in the SEC championship, is ranked 3 and gets the 5 seed. And they will host the 12 seed Clemson, who won the ACC championship over SMU. Penn State, ranked 4th, will get the 6th seed, and they will face the loser of the ACC championship and 10th ranked SMU, who is the 11th seed. Number 5 ranked Notre Dame, as the 7th seed, will host number 8 ranked Indiana, who is the 10th seed. And the 8th seed and 6th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes will host the 7th ranked and number 9 seed Tennessee Volunteers. So that's the bracket in the most confusing way possible to probably read the whole damn thing. What's important to Penn State? Penn State will host a game against SMU noon on TNT this Saturday. Or excuse me, next Saturday. Get my days mixed up already. If they were to win that football game, they would then go to the Fiesta Bowl and play Boise State and potentially the Heisman Trophy winner in Austin Genty. If they would win that football game, they would go to the Orange Bowl and face either Indiana, Notre Dame, or Georgia. And then if they were to win that game, they'd be in the championship versus whoever came out of the top side of the bracket, whether that's Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Clemson, maybe even Arizona State or Tennessee. So that's kind of how it all ranks out. So this weekend, Texas hosts, Ohio State hosts, Penn State hosts, and Notre Dame hosts. I don't think I have to be Mr. Obvious here, Shawn, when I tell you Penn State got a hell of a path to the semifinals compared to what Oregon, who is the number 1 seed, still has to face the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State. Penn State, very favorable, taking on 2 different horse mascots in SMU and Boise State before getting to the semifinals to either face Notre Dame, Indiana, or Georgia. Can't get much better than that. And then even then, Shawn, the semifinal matchup, Indiana, Notre Dame, or Georgia, as someone had mentioned earlier on YouTube, They don't even know if Carson Beck, the starting quarterback for Georgia, is going to be healthy. They might have to go with that Stockton kid. So who knows what to expect as far as who Penn State could play. But Penn State is going to be favored probably by a touchdown in both this SMU and Boise State game if they're able to get there.
End of the SEC championship was so bizarre, wasn't it? Beck ran out. He can't even lift his arm. I was like, what are they thinking? What just had the third string quarterback go in and hand the ball off. Just something that boggled my mind. I was like, how did he get cleared to do this? And I feel like nobody talked about it. They were just like, look at him gut it out as he's dragging his arm. He looks like Woody from Toy Story after he got the tear. I was like, are we watching the same thing right now? All right, just had to get that out of the way. But yes, this is a positive path for Penn State, obviously, and everybody and their grandmother has been talking about what a great path this is for Penn State. And yeah, we caught a break this year, guys. And Penn State fans are so used to not catching breaks about anything. And this is one. I think SMU is better than people are giving them credit for. I just talked on last episode before we even knew we were playing SMU. I thought SMU was really good. Then you play Boise State. You could be playing the Heisman Trophy winner or the Heisman Trophy runner up. And he's very, very good. He ran all over Oregon as well, just like our guys did. But he's very, very, very good. So it's not going to be. I don't want people to think this is going to be some cakewalk. Do I feel good about the games? I do. And then you get the semifinals. You're either going to play Notre Dame, Georgia, or Indiana. I got in my head I picked Notre Dame, just because I don't think Carson Beck is very healthy, and I'm a little skeptical on how good Georgia is as well. I think they're good enough to beat Texas twice, but other than those Texas games, I haven't really been that thrilled by them this year, and they're going in unhealthy. So if we have a path of SMU, Boise State, Notre Dame, I think you got to feel pretty good about that, guys.
I feel really good if you're Northern Illinois.
I think they could come in here and compete, at least with the Irish. And then I want to make one more point too.
Yes. Make as many points as you want, Shawn.
An overarching point, because some of this has annoyed me. From the national media.
This would be great.
So the one everybody knew in the national media, now fans may not have, but the national media, they knew for 2 years what this playoff format was going to be, right? And they knew conference championships, top 4 conference champions are going to get a bye. I don't love it, but everybody knew that. What I don't understand is people like Joel Klatt getting on here talking like he just discovered this and that the committee somehow got it wrong. And like we have to almost like look for good matchups for the top seeds, and we got to reseed after the first round. Why? Why do we have to reseed? I understand not having a bye guaranteed for the top 4 conference championships. I actually agree with that.
Me too.
Reseeding this, I don't think that's necessary. You may not like how the 8-9 matchup turned out, but that's the 8-9 matchup. That's how it is in high school basketball and college basketball in these playoffs, and these tournaments. That's how it falls sometimes. And sometimes you get a tough matchup for the 1 seed after that. And there's a world that exists where Indiana and SMU are the 8-9 seed. There's a world that exists where that happens if a couple other things fall that way. But I don't think I think to blame the committee for this is kind of absurd. Blame the conference commissioners who put this thing together, because that's who really needs the blame. I think the only thing I really disagree with this bracket is Boise being ranked ahead of Arizona State, because Arizona State played really, really well against Arizona State or against Iowa State, and they only lost 2 games in a Power 4 conference. Boise lost 1 in a group of 5. I'm okay with them getting that 4 seed over Clemson because Clemson has 3 losses, but I think you just flip-flop Arizona State, and Boise, and I really don't have an issue with the rest of this bracket.
No,
using the criteria that the committee had.
And I think you hit on a big point there. First of all, the committee does not seed the teams; they rank the teams.
Right. Yes, exactly. They're not looking for matchups like,
no.
Well, Oregon, they actually should match up with these guys. No, that's not the way this works. And I don't know why national media people are acting like that's how it works. It's not how it works.
They believe Oregon's the best team in the country. They gave them the 1 seed. Or no, I just messed it up. They gave them ranked number 1. They thought Georgia was the second best team. They ranked them number 2. They thought Penn State was the 4th best team, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of this wouldn't have happened, Shawn, if Alabama would have, if SMU wins the ACC championship and Alabama makes the playoff, because then Penn State very well could have played Alabama. Who knows how this all would have gone down? But if Penn State hosts Alabama, then I don't think people are making the Oregon Penn State comparison anymore, because then it's like, oh man, Oregon had to face Tennessee, Ohio State, but Penn State has to face Alabama, and no one would actually be questioning the fact that there's a chance that SMU is actually better than Alabama. I hate to break it to people, but there is a very, very logical reason or rhyme that SMU is better than Alabama. And if you don't think so, go ask why Alabama just lost 21 points to Oklahoma this year. So I think the name brand is what's kind of throwing people off here instead of what they are. At the end of the day, you could argue this SMU team is one of the best pass offenses in the country, is not a great matchup for Penn State. And then you could say, oh, and then they have to face the Heisman Trophy winner in the next round. Like, that is theoretically not an easy path. Overall talent across the rosters, yes, Penn State's going to have an advantage. But from a matchup perspective, this is still going to be a challenge for Penn State. And honestly, if Penn State gets Jalen Milroe, who turns the football over more times than most at home, you got to feel almost good about getting Alabama. So, but I think that's the biggest thing to people is the fact that Alabama didn't make it. And the SEC fans are treating this like, I'm going to take my ball and go home because Alabama with 3 losses didn't make it. And they're not sitting there in the playoff, but an SMU is. That is really the start of that whole conversation.
Yes, and that's a good point, too. It's so pathetic to cry about missing the playoff, losing 3 games, 2 of which were to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. I am telling you, I would never, ever, ever, ever do that if that was Penn State, because you look like a clown when you do things like that.
I think the thing to me, Shawn, is like where the Alabama fans are getting it wrong is, yes, we know Alabama is capable of beating very good teams.
Sure.
But
they did it.
So is Vandy. So is Arkansas. Doesn't mean that we should put them in the playoff just because they won a football game. Should we put Northern Illinois in the playoff because they have the best win compared to most of these teams in the playoff? No. They won at Notre Dame. Yeah, that's a better win than pretty much anybody on here besides maybe Oregon and Ohio State. Should we just put them in the playoff? No, you got to look at the losses too. And you can't tell me that Alabama could play Penn State's schedule or Indiana's schedule and not also lose games like they did to Vandy and to Oklahoma. You can't tell me they wouldn't potentially do that, because it is very likely that they would have, whether that would be at Minnesota, whether that would be at USC, whether that would be home against Michigan, if you're considering Indiana's schedule, whether that's even home against Washington. Like, those teams are just as good, if not better, than Oklahoma. And Alabama wasn't able to not just beat Oklahoma, but they lost by 3 touchdowns. Like, imagine trying to say you deserve to be in a playoff and you lost to Oklahoma by 21 points. End the discussion. Go home.
You're drunk. Go home, you're drunk, kids. Yeah, Bama, to me, nothing to complain about. And look, I'm happy the committee did it this way, because if you let Bama in over SMU, then you should just make it the Big Ten SEC invitation at that point, because that's essentially what it would be. And I don't think that's the way this should be. This regular season still has to matter, and the committee had an obligation to make the regular season still matter, and the games that you play still matter, not just well, who would be favored? And well, we all know SMU would lose to Alabama, do we? Again, like everybody's talking like this is some foregone conclusion that the great Alabama would never lose to SMU. Well, guys, Nick Saban ain't on that sideline. And I think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, but do I think Nick Saban would lose to SMU? No. But he also wouldn't have lost to Oklahoma. He wouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt. They did this year. So this is not like the mythical Alabama anymore, the godlike Alabama anymore. That's just not who this team is. They're good. They could beat anybody. If Penn State played them tomorrow, yeah, they could absolutely beat us. They could absolutely beat Oregon. They could absolutely beat Ohio State. But what you do during the regular season has to matter. And I think going 11-1 in a Power Four conference is much more impressive than going 9-3 in the SEC with two really bad losses. So I don't think this was that tough. It wouldn't have been that tough of a decision for me.
No, not at all.
And it's not like SMU got blown out in the ACC title game either. They lost by 3 points. They were down early, but they lost on a 50-some yard field goal. Yeah, like it's not like they got killed by Clemson. They lost, but they didn't get killed.
Jay says Klatt is unbearable to listen to, and Benny's Nation says you let Alabama in, then you essentially penalize SMU for losing in a conference championship, as you just kind of said.
That's the other thing. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a horrible precedent to set because then we shouldn't even play conference championship games anymore.
John, I'm curious, does my mic get better or worse when I just did that? Or about the same?
I think a little worse.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. It's actually using my correct microphone, but Lumberjake says, no, it's the SEC is so much better than everyone else that our 6-6 losses are actually really good. Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Nicole Auerbach, of all people, made a point, and I can't believe I'm giving her credit for something, but she made a good point. Are we really going to start comparing 6-6 teams from different conferences? Like that, this is getting to be crazy talk now.
Right.
Like, oh, my 6-6 team could beat your 6-6 team. What the hell are we doing?
We decided that the Monday show is going to be about recruiting and National Signing Day. But Shawn, I want to at least give you 2 minutes here. Penn State landed the number 1 kid in Pennsylvania. Kind of a shocker to a lot of us. What happened there?
Yeah, Andrew Olish flipped from Michigan to Penn State. This is a guy that Penn State has had on their radar for a long time. And James Franklin in public recruited him, not using his name, of course, but had referenced, really good tight ends in Pennsylvania should stay in Pennsylvania. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But yeah, really athletic kid. You see his testing numbers, they're off the wall. His film is really good. He looks like a man amongst boys. I think part of that is he I don't think his conference is all that strong where he plays high school football. And he is just moving at a different speed, and he's the biggest kid on the field. But he backs it up with his testing numbers, and I think this kid has a chance to be really special here. And this tight end room is so crowded now. I think we talked a little bit last episode about Jerry Cross transferring out, and that's why. We've just recruited this room really well. We have 3 tight ends coming in this season, in addition to having Luke Reynolds there next year and Khalil Dinkins and Andrew Applier. So it's going to be a crowded tight end room. But Olish and Joey Schlaffer. But Olish, he's probably the next one after Luke Reynolds is done here.
Yeah. Hey, Shawn, my mic better or worse now? I'm just curious.
Worse.
How about now?
Better.
How about now?
Sound more echoey.
This one?
Yeah. There you go.
This is good?
Leave it there.
There's all these settings on here. I don't know which ones to push. Jay asked us about if Drew comes back. We have a fan question about that in just a second. Before I get there, we're going to talk transfer portal on Monday too, but defensive tackle T.A. Cunningham did enter the transfer portal as well, so I wanted to at least mention that. We'll talk more about that on the Monday show. Let's get into fan questions because we have a decent amount of them. Let's jump over and talk about fan questions. All righty. Fan question time. Oh, by the way, I think Penn State's recruiting class is about top 15 right now in the 2025 class. Wanted to mention that real quickly. We talked a little bit about officiating. This first question here from Will Gamble. Was that the worst officiated game you've ever seen? Because all the missed calls or bad calls all benefited Oregon, just like they did in the Ohio State game. Don't know if he's alluding to this year's Ohio State game or if he's alluding to the 2014 Ohio State game. That to me is still one of the worst ones, in my opinion, was that 2014 game. I don't know if it was the worst game ever. I mean, the Michigan game back in 2005, was up there as well. The Nebraska call was that 2011,
12, I think.
12 with Lehman.
Yeah,
that was up there. And that's just, I know like specific atrocious calls, but look, they didn't call holding penalty on Penn State this game either. You could probably call holding on every play, as the saying goes. The non-catch incompletion play is absurd to me. That one doesn't make any sense. To overturn it and not review it was just insane. I think James Trent had some comments about that one specifically. I don't know what that one for the non-unsportsmanlike one was on the kickoff. I didn't really ever see a good
I didn't like that one either.
Review of that one. Vega Ione clearly can't face plant people's heads into the ground. I think they ate and chewed their whistle a little bit more in the second half. I thought they did miss an offensive pass interference on that 3rd and 3 against Penn State that Oregon was able to pick up. Not the worst officiated game, not their best. It's been a tough year for Big Ten officials.
Yeah, we've seen so many badly officiated games over the years with the Big Ten. I think it actually used to be a little worse, if you could believe that. But a huge problem with the Big Ten, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is the lack of holds. And I think that gets amplified when you have an edge rusher as good as Abdul Carter. And the offensive tackles are going to see what they could get away with. It's a lot like basketball. When you're playing against a really good player, you're going to try to test your limits with the refs. And if you're able to get away with some hand checking and you're able to get away with some fouls, you're going to keep doing that, because that makes things, if the ref is essentially letting you get away with things, let you cheat, if you will, you're going to do that because it just makes your job so much easier. And I think that's something that Abdul Carter has dealt with the whole season, and it just gets extra magnified when you lose a game. So I think the problem Penn State had, and James Franklin actually said the penalties were lopsided. Penn State actually Oregon was actually penalized a little bit more than Penn State. They had 5 penalties. Penn State had 3, but it's the missed calls that I think are driving Penn State crazy, and I understand that. And then the penalties that were called on Penn State, we had 4 personal fouls. The 2 were face masks. The one was a killer face mask on Tony Rojas because we had them stopped on a 4th and 1. And then Oregon ended up scoring a couple plays later. That was a killer, but it was legit. That one, the 2 face masks were legit. The one with Vanga was legit. I did not like the one on the kickoff return. We only saw one angle, though, and it was from the end zone. So maybe if we saw another angle, it would have looked a little better. It would have looked like a better call. But, just the angle that I saw, I didn't really like the penalty. And then the other one that they missed was Drew got thrown into the ground after he threw the ball the one time, and they didn't call that penalty. And to me, if you're going to be calling personal fouls, you got to call that one. So didn't really like that penalty or non-call. So yeah, I think there have been worse games, but penalty or Big Ten officiating is a problem. Luckily for Penn State fans, you don't have to see a Big Ten of crew the rest of the year. We do have the SEC coming up here. I think somebody made the point on the Blue White Illustrated show. Penn State only has one recent experience with the SEC officials, and they did something the Big Ten refs have never done for us. Made us punt on third down. So that's our one interaction we've had with SEC officials in the past 15 years. So hopefully, it's better than that.
We've had to have them for bowl games at some point.
Yeah, that's true. We probably did. But that's one thing that I've never seen. So I'm not sure how much better it's going to get with the SEC crews.
Yeah, I mean, college officiating has been bad all over the
just
place.
In general.
Jay corrects me there, said the OPI was actually on 4th and 2. So appreciate that one. And then, yeah, I think you do have to showcase your best players, and allowing the holes against Abdul Carter does detract from the game. I agree with that, right? By letting them do that, it hurts that. Andrew Adair asks, is this Tom Allen's last coaching job? Is he interested in being a head coach again? I don't think this is. Look, if Penn State makes it far in the playoff, they're not going to get rid of Tom Allen. I can tell you that right now. I don't think Tom Allen's in any huge rush to get back to being a head coach. I just don't think he. I think he kind of didn't enjoy it at Indiana to a certain degree, and I think he's pretty excited to not be a head coach and get back to coaching kids again and not doing all the CEO stuff. So no, I don't think it is his last coaching stint, and I don't think he wants to be a head coach again. I do wish he'd get a little bit more aggressive, and I wish we could be a little bit more unpredictable in the first quarter and not give up so many scripted touchdowns from the opposing offense.
Yeah, is it his last job? I mean, you never know. I don't think anybody, and this isn't a slight toward him, I don't think anybody's really banging down the door to go get Tom Allen as a head coach. So that's one thing. So I don't think we really necessarily have to worry about that. Is he interested in being a head coach again? I mean, I can't get in his head, but I do generally agree with what Cory said. I don't think things really went as he wanted at Indiana, and some guys are better as a coordinator. And I do think he is. I know we were kind of tough on Tom Allen tonight. We've been kind of tough on him for a lot of the year, but he is a good coordinator. Like, he belongs on this level. Do I think he could win a national championship with him as your defense coordinator? I do. But he needs to be better. And they're not going to win with him calling a game like he did on Saturday, where, like you said, you just kind of sit back and let athletes go. And I think the reason they were playing so far back at times and leaving that middle of the field open was to not give up stuff over the top, but it's not working. Like, they're still picking up huge chunks of yards. We're not playing, Washington, where you just kind of sit back and then, Abdul Carter is going to go sack him at some point and force him in the 3rd and long. Like, you gotta push the envelope a little bit, and that's something they just didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, you go back and look at even like the Wisconsin game. Like, they had those same open avenues. They just couldn't catch the football.
Yeah. I think people forget, like, throughout the year, there were a lot of missed throws that were like, ooh, that was close, that we got away with. But when you're playing guys at this caliber, they're going to make you pay for that.
Right. Next question here from Dorito Bandit, longtime listener of the show. What are the chances that we retain Nick Singleton and Drew Allar for next year? So a lot of questions about this, whether that was on X this past week or even in the YouTube chat today. I texted you, Shawn, about this. I was like, Drew Allar needs to either figure it out as far as, if you're going to play this well, then we need to figure out and win the national championship, because you're not coming back. Or you need to stop playing so damn well because we want you back next year. But you can't be doing this halvesy in between shit, because then you're going to get drafted really high and we're not going to win a national championship. I didn't get to make this comparison earlier, but I kind of hinted at it, and that wasn't even my comparison. I don't know if you brought it up or if our friend Higgins brought it up first. His performance on Saturday was very Clifford-like, in the sense that you were kind of riding the highs and you're having to deal with the lows. I think he was making way better plays than Clifford was, way harder throws than Clifford ever had to make for most part. But he also had some really bad throws and obviously the 2 interceptions. It felt like one of those games versus the whole not super high ceiling, but not a low floor that we're where we were used to with Drew Aller. But I right now am willing to say Drew Aller is like a coin flip on whether he comes back or not. If he keeps playing like this with the national attention now, which he will get, I think he's gone. I saw that the recruiting side of the college football world, or excuse me, the scouting side of the college football NFL world is beginning to talk about him more. And I'll just quickly say Nick Singleton, 99.999% gone.
You think so?
Yes.
I think the odds are a little better. I don't know anything, but I just think they are.
I think Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, 99.999% gone.
Both?
Yes.
Does Corey know something we don't know?
99.999% gone.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know. I think the odds are a little better than that. As far as Drew goes, it's hard to say at this point, right? Because God forbid, we lose to SMU and he doesn't play so well. Yeah, I think he comes back. And I think people are not necessarily mad at him, but just mad at the situation of it. But I think he'll need to put more on tape than just one game where he made some nice throws against Oregon. Because the rap on him is game manager and kind of mechanical. Whereas on Saturday, though, he didn't look like that. He didn't look like no game manager on Saturday. He made mistakes, but you can't say game manager. But he's got to have more than that. It can't just be a flash in the pan. So I think he needs to string games together here, which he has an excellent opportunity to do. In order to get into that conversation with the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. I happen to think the top quarterbacks in next year's draft, I think it's kind of slim pickings. I think they all have warts. There's no, I think last year's was pretty superior with Jaden Daniels. I think Drake May and Caleb Williams, who I think is having a better year than people are giving him credit for. I don't really think the lineup is as good this year. So there's a vacuum right now for top tier quarterbacks in this coming draft. So if he could string some games together, yeah, I think there's a good chance he goes. Just so you know, Corey, just keep this one from Dorito Bandit on the screen because it's on there right now.
I don't know what you mean by that.
So I'm not seeing the one that asked about Singleton and Allar. I'm seeing the one from Dorito Bandit about the championship.
Oh no, that was just his expectation. His question is right below that.
Gotcha. Oh, my bad. I'm an idiot. I can't read.
It's okay. If he gets drafted, he's probably gonna end up at the Browns or the Giants. So even more of a reason to come back.
Yeah,
I guess he could maybe go to the Dolphins, but I don't know what you guys are gonna do.
I wouldn't hate it.
Lambda
I love Tua, but he's Tua.
Lambda asked if Katron gets drafted. I would say yes, he does. I'll just reiterate the reason why those two both wanted to come to Penn State was to limit how much wear and tear. You kind of lose that kind of value if you then stay another year and are the number one back. Like the whole point of this was come here for 3 years, share the load, both go to the NFL with a lot of tread on your tires.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, they could be playing a 17-game season, which that's a lot. That's a lot of football games. And you could be playing a season where you go through 9 games in the Big Ten, 10 games in the Big Ten, and then another 4 playoff games against really good teams.
Yeah. Benny says, you don't think that Allar could be a Jet? I don't want to talk about that. That sounds terrible. Oh. All right. This question is not right from Einstein von Braun. So Einstein von Braun changed his question, which we don't do this for everybody, but since we love Einstein von Braun, he decided to revise his question. And it is now, is it fair to be apprehensive about the portal hopping wide receivers after the Dante Cephas debacle? Fleming hasn't been a superstar either, but has brought some leadership. My worry is that for Fleming for every Fleming, there are 10 Cephas, only doing it for money and not for opportunity. So, Shawn, is it fair to be skeptical about the transfer portal when it comes to wide receivers? Probably should save this question more for next week's show, but there are some receivers that Penn State is already targeting. They're not being quiet on the transfer portal, especially in the wide receiver room. So I'm sure Penn State fans are excited about that. But you are kind of skeptical as far as whether or not they're going to pay off. Although Penn State just lost to a team that did really well in the transfer portal with Tez Johnson, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's fair to be apprehensive, but it's something you got to do, right? And that's why having hits are important, because a team like Oregon has been very active in the transfer portal. There are two leading receivers. I don't think we talked enough about how good AJ Harris played. He was on their other really good receiver, and he didn't do very much. His name escapes me right now. But they were both from the portal. Where Penn State in the last couple of years, where I'll be kind of Julian Fleming and say 1 for 3. But even Fleming really wasn't what we hoped he would be. I think that's fair, even though he had some moments. But then the other two guys just didn't work. In Malik McLean and Dante Cephas. So yeah, it's fair to be apprehensive because we've been burned a little bit. But it doesn't mean you don't try. And I think if there's one positive to hang on to as well, I do think these young guys are going to be good. I do think Tysier Denmark, Peter Gonzalez, who was hurt most of the year, Matthew Auten, who we're going to talk about a lot on Monday. I think these guys are going to be good. I just don't know how good they're going to be next year. I think you're going to see a lot more Tysier Denmark next year. I think you're going to see a lot more Peter Gonzalez. As far as the true freshmen, we all know how unpredictable that will be. That is. But I do think you're going to see them get a lot of help from the guys that they already have, because I think these guys could play.
We'll talk more about the transfers on the Monday show. All right, we're going to move to this question here. People wanted to talk more about Andy Kotelnicki. This question, now we know, is done, but the sense of it is still important. Maybe unpack a little bit more. So CJ had asked, would Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator for Penn State, realistically jump ship prior to this natty run? Funny you asked this, because at the end of the day, it seems that one of the reasons why West Virginia decided to move on from Andy Kotelnicki was because he was unwilling to take the job immediately and wanted to finish his playoff run, which in this day and age, with the transfer portal already open and you're trying, we already mentioned UNC got their new head coach and West Virginia now has their new head coach in Rich Rod. You want to hit the ground running ASAP. National Signing Day has already started. I get that from West Virginia's side of things. However, at the end of the day, to me, if you were trying to go get somebody, you do not want to go get somebody who is not going to finish what they started with whatever team they're currently at. You want a man with high integrity. You want a football guy. Anybody you want to lead your program and to turn your program around, you want that person to finish what they started with the current kids they have if they're have an opportunity to win the whole damn thing. So it's kind of a catch-22 for West Virginia. But in my opinion, Andy Kotelnicki actually improved his resume by saying, I'm not leaving until my job's done here. And that's not unfamiliar territory. You go back to when Bill O'Brien was moving around. He finished his playoff run with the Patriots. Andy Kotelnicki deserves whatever head coaching job comes his way to the players that helped him get him there previously. And I think that's a character move. I think that's the right move. It's a football guy move. I'm not surprised by that. And to answer your question, no, I don't think Andy Kotelnicki realistically would ever jump ship prior to Penn State completing their playoff run, whether it is next weekend or if it's during the national championship.
Yeah, and the thing is too, Corey, I kind of understand where West Virginia was coming from, because this is such a crazy time for college football, and nobody likes this calendar, but it just doesn't seem to change. Where you have the portal, where you have the late signing day coming up in February. So Andy's going to have now it'll be Rich Rod, has to put a class together, because I'm going to assume, I haven't looked at West Virginia's recruiting class, but I assume a lot of guys aren't going to sign they're not going to sign on to this without a head coach there, which makes sense for them, because you don't know who you're committing to. And so I understand where West Virginia was coming from. Could you technically do both? You could, but I think that's much more difficult. So would he realistically jump ship? I mean, he could. We've seen it happen before. I think it's more rare though when you're in the playoffs. Like, I do think if we were in the 14 playoff last year, Manny Diaz probably stays with us for that run. But everything's wrapped up in early January then, where this goes way into January, if we end up in the finals. So is it realistic that he could have? I mean, maybe, but he didn't. So you have to give him credit for that.
Absolutely. Benny asked a question about whether the NFL should adopt some sort of not allowing interviews for those coaches still in the playoff. I doubt that would ever be happen, since we can't even agree on conference games, but it's funny to think about. This next question here from John Ashley: do you expect, if it happens, for Danny O'Brien to become the offensive coordinator, or do you see James Franklin getting a higher profile coach? If so, then who do you think? So this didn't happen, so we don't have to worry about it, but I think the premise is still here. Do you think that they have their next offensive coordinator on the roster? I think it wouldn't be Danny O'Brien. I don't think he has the caliber resume to fulfill that role. I think also James Franklin, no disrespect to Ricky Rainey, isn't going to just de facto give that role to somebody inside for no reason. And I don't think O'Brien would be next on that anyway. I think maybe a Ty Howell, I think a Jaywan Sider would probably have a better chance of that. I don't know if Trotwine even wants something like that at some point, but I don't think it would be. But if I had to put my money on it, I would still think he would go outside the program and to hire the next offensive coordinator. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's no longer an issue. But I do think Danny O'Brien has played an important role here with Drew Allar, but I don't think he's necessarily ready to become an offensive coordinator at Penn State.
Yeah, I don't even think he was officially a full-time staff member per se until this season. I mean, he was, but Mike Yurcich was technically, I think he was still technically the quarterback coach all the way up to last season.
Yeah.
So, but Danny O'Brien was essentially the quarterback coach. It's just the way things went. Yeah, I don't think it would be Danny O'Brien. And Franklin has had a tendency, even when he's had successful units like the defense last year, he still went outside the program and brought Tom Allen in. I think he gives guys opportunities to interview for jobs. Deion Barnes got the defensive line job coming as an analyst. So I think he gives guys opportunities, but he is more than willing to look outside, and coordinators are important. And he hasn't promoted one from within, I think, since Ricky Ronnie. And on both sides of the ball, he promoted Pry from within when Bob Shoop left. And he promoted Ricky Ronnie from within after Jomo left. But since then, he hasn't done that and in any unit, including special teams. So I do think, based on past history, based on what the pool, one of the things that he wanted was a bigger money pool to bring in and retain coaches. I do think he would look outside the program.
Also promoted within from the strength and conditioning side of things, for whatever that is worth.
That's true.
Really want to just mention too, real quick, about those assistant coaches. Wanted to give a shout out to Charles Huff, who made the transition from Marshall, won the Sun Belt with Marshall, and is now headed to Southern Miss, potentially this whole team. Most of you listening probably have not been with me from the beginning of my podcasting career, so to speak. Charles Huff gave me an interview back when I had like 10 people listening to me. Had no real reason to do that, so I always have a special place in my heart for Charles Huff. Good luck to him at Southern Miss. And I wanted to mention former assistant coach Tim Banks is also in the running for the Broyles Assistant Coach of the Year award. So I wanted to give some love to Tim Banks there at Tennessee. So good for them. Let's get to our last two questions here. This question here is from Mudbug. Are we going to the first round game? Very easy question to answer. At least for me, I will be going to the game. Shawn, the tickets are going down. Are you going to make your way to State College in 2 weeks?
Probably not.
Even though the prices are dropping.
I mean, you never know what could happen. But at this point, probably not. But who knows?
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's get to our final question here. Thank you again for all the fan questions. Following us on Twitter, Hardcore PSUFB. You can ask us questions there. We always ask every week. Last question here from Matt Funk. With the path ahead of us, would anything less than semifinals be considered a failure? This was basically what my question was to all the people who asked the fan questions this week, what the expectations are, and have the goalposts moved, Shawn. Are we looking at a scenario where you and I kind of agreed? We were in a situation where we thought, hey, if Penn State hosts a playoff game, wins it, and then gets to the second round, whatever happens, happens. That's kind of originally what we envisioned. Has that changed? Is the expectation now making the semifinals or bust for Penn State?
It's kind of I'll give a nuanced answer. Would it be a step forward for the program if they just beat SMU? Factually, yes, because that is making the playoff. That is winning a game against a top 10 team. So factually, yes, that would be a step forward, and some people would define that as a success. I think, though, expectations change throughout a season. So I believe if you have a draw like SMU and Boise State back-to-back, you got to win those games. You're better than these teams, and you need to go and win these games. Failure is a strong word, and I still would say it was a step forward for the program if they go and beat SMU. But yeah, I think they failed to live up to their standard if they lose one of these next two games.
Hard question to answer. I will just say this. I don't see the people that don't think Penn State's any good. I don't see them changing their mind if Penn State beats SMU. I don't see them changing their mind if they beat Boise State. I don't see them changing their mind if they would play Indiana. That would mean Indiana beat Notre Dame and Georgia, by the way. Even if they beat those two teams and Penn State then beat Indiana, people still wouldn't give them any credit. You would have to then get to the championship in order to receive the credit necessary and win that. And at that point, I don't even know if you get the credit, because watch them face like an Arizona State and still not get the credit or something crazy like that. Just the way it all would go. But I do think the expectations have gotten a little bit more severe. And I will say it's credit to Penn State to a certain degree on this. I don't know if I would feel that good about these next two matchups if I didn't see their offensive line bully Oregon's defensive line. Like running 8.7 yards per carry against Oregon's defensive line, and I think at least offensively playing your best football right now does set a certain level of higher expectation. I will finish that by saying they absolutely cannot lose to SMU. I don't care.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't think the matchup is great from a SMU offense to Penn State defense perspective. It doesn't matter. They cannot lose to this SMU team that really should have lost to Manny Diaz's Duke team earlier this year. It just cannot happen.
Can you imagine that stadium if they lose?
Oh my God.
Oh man.
I don't even want to think about it.
No, it would be bad. Yeah, you absolutely need to beat SMU. 100%, no questions asked. You need to win that game.
Shawn, we went extra long tonight, almost 2 hours. A lot to talk about. I don't even know if we hit all of our housekeeping items. I am working on the Big Ten pick'em. I haven't got to it. And there's no more games. Just got to figure it out. We got to figure out the prizes. But we'll take care of that. If you've made it this far in the podcast and you're watching live, please make sure you're liking the video on YouTube. you're subscribing on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. We really appreciate that. Thank you for all those that dropped questions and comments and are watching live on X as well. We appreciate all of you. It's been a fantastic season. Very, very excited. We're still talking about Penn State football, and they still have a chance to win something in middle of December. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is where we wanted to be, right? And you look at the way things shook out in the brackets, and I'll say it again, we caught a break. And it feels to me, Corey, and I guess we'll end with this. If it's not now, then when? Right? Like, I want to win one of these national championships they talk about before we die. Preferably while we have a podcast too. So feels like now is the time, right? With the way this is shaken out. Carson Beck unfortunately gets hurt. And then you get to the title game. Best two teams on the other side of the bracket, in my opinion, are Ohio State and Oregon. It's hard to beat a good team twice.
I think in general, the best two teams other than Penn State are Ohio State and Oregon.
I do too.
I don't want to sound too Big Ten bias here, but Penn State is on the right side of the bracket. And I agree with all that. But Shawn, this is something James Franklin said. He's not getting anybody back from injuries that maybe they were hoping to get. No Anthony Dunca, no KJ Winston, and no Keon Wiley. We were hoping maybe one of those guys would get back for the playoff. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. He could just be gamesmanshipping the hell out of us for all we know. But I am very concerned, Shawn, that this defense is not good enough to win a national championship. I could be proven wrong, but the last thing on my mind is hot knife through butter with the Oregon offense. And I know that's the number one team in the country, and that's a really good offense. And they probably wouldn't face an offense like that unless they played Oregon again. So I get all of those things. But what if they play a worse game than they did against Oregon on defense?
Yeah, and it could happen.
That to me makes me, and I agree with you, like, if not now, then when? And that makes me really excited. But I kind of keep going back to what's the weakest link right now. And I don't know if the defense is good enough. Unless Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton absolutely just take over again.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, you could make a solid argument. Oregon is really the only team capable of doing that to Penn State, but guys, there's a very good chance we play Oregon again. I think they're the favorite in this thing. Well, I don't know if they're the odds-on favorite, but they're my favorite to win it. I just think they're the most complete team. The thing with Ohio State is I don't really trust Will Howard to win 4 straight games against the teams he's going to be playing against. I just don't think he has that in him. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I just haven't seen it. So I think Oregon is the team to beat. So yeah, that's a valid concern. And then the other thing is, I know the run game was awesome on Saturday, but we've seen that kind of come and go. And are we going to be able to run the ball well enough 4 straight games to win it? That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys all for listening. I was going to say one last thing. They Circus Sports did put out like their best odds as far as who would face who. The best odds right now is for a Oregon Penn State rematch in a national championship. So take that for what you will.
Man, as I bless myself.
Yeah. Anyway, you have plenty of podcasts to get you through the rest of your week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching live. That's Shawn Kane. I'm Cory Lestochi. Wish me luck, as I still have yet to get a deer this hunting season. And we will be back on Monday. Until then, stay happy and try to stay warm, as it's going to get cold here in the middle of Pennsylvania. Until next time.